Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan. I'm a co-founder at Generic. We're building confidentiality stablecoin infrastructure, and this talk is about a bit of the mismatch of where it's needed and what a solution looks like. I realize I don't have a clicker. Do I get a clicker? Nice. Okay, cool. So, as anyone that is building privacy and confidentiality on chain, we get very excited. There are like a lot of nerds talk about this. You just heard the previous talk. It's one of the verticals that is still seeing VC interest alongside RWA. Everything else is basically dead in terms of like fundability at the moment. So we went out and we spoke with like actual potential users, which is enterprises, PSPs, custodians, etc. So something that came across, which is, at least for us, it was unexpected when we started doing this, is that like a lot of the demand is not really coming from like an end source, but it's intermediaries and infrastructure providers preparing for the arrival of actual demand. And those like end organizations, so enterprises and institutionals that actually take privacy seriously, they're not looking at it from leaking competitive intel perspective. They're looking at it from, okay, I have a like user protection regulation that I need to comply with on behalf of my clients, and that's why they're thinking about privacy and confidentiality on chain. So it's more around regulatory obligations. And why is sort of like nobody too worried about this at the moment? So currently, this is roughly what the stack would look like. A lot of the enterprise clients and frankly, a lot of like the more traditional institutions, they would go through like a PSP that provides a hosted wallet and through a custodian before they hit the network, right? So from their perspective, I mean, some of them don't even realize that transactions are going on a public chain where everything is visible. But something else that is like relevant at the moment is, if you look on the network, you would see, I don't know, cross-mint paying BVNK, or just like a transfer between two cross-mint wallets, because this payment processor basically provides abstraction of who's behind this. This is, however, at the moment just on like UX level, basically. And we believe that that sort of abstraction is going to run its course in terms of usefulness. And at some point, like more and more of the flow would be visible on chain. Why do we believe that? Glad you. I mean, you didn't ask, but let's assume you did. Basically, there is like $1 billion industry around on-chain analytics. We have Nansen, we have Chainalysis, we have Arkham. Like those are players that have something like 500 million wallets labeled on-chain. The infrastructure around this sort of analytics is getting better and better by the day. The gap between technically public and practically readable is shrinking. We have AI, which drastically decreases the cost of running these analytics, and soon enough, basically all your flows will be visible to someone who doesn't need to hire a team of financial forensic analysts. They just need a $200 subscription. And something that is sort of, again, like if you're just a user of the network, not necessarily intuitive, is a lot of people would use a centralized exchange as a mixer or a confidentiality bridge of sorts, right? The thing is, in a centralized exchange, a lot of the funds get commingled because you're dealing with like end consumer funds. If you're dealing with a custodian or a PSP, from an institutional perspective, you have segregated accounts. So a custodian would spin up often multiple wallets that are just for you, and they wouldn't mix assets of different clients, which actually like results in better traceability on chain. And then something else that actually is a reason why organizations are going towards like future-proofing is that the more history you have on chain, the easier it becomes to decode behaviors. As we just saw in the previous talk, it was just the perspective of a consumer, but if you think of enterprise pay flows, things look quite similar. It just, the counterparty that is interested to understand what's going on is different. It's not someone who wants to sell you something, it's often like a competitor or someone who wants to get better negotiating power knowing your behaviors. So although like most of it is future positioning at the moment, there are undeniable signs of demand arriving on chain. So we have regulatory clarity, we had the Genius Act that mandated what a federal level stablecoin would look like. We had the FSAB treatment of stablecoins, which was a big unlock. It basically means that if you have stablecoins on your balance sheet as an organization, like as an auditable organization in the real world, these stablecoins would be treated on par with cash or cash equivalents instead of being written down to zero, which was the previous treatment. And this means that it becomes practical for companies that are subject to the GAAP, which is the American standard or the global standard for auditing, like financial reporting. They can actually hold stablecoins now without getting punished for it. And lastly, there is the Clarity Act that is currently undergoing final touches. Yes, the treatment of yield is not exactly what we hoped for, but it adds, as the name suggests, some clarity on how these things would be handled, which inevitably creates less friction for an institution to come on chain. We've seen also like volume picking up tremendously, like 730% in a year, and this is B2B volume specifically. We're also seeing large players spend serious money on acquisitions of infrastructure in the space that show conviction into the future of on-chain payments. So we spoke that like a lot of enterprise use cases don't really care too much about privacy today. There is one quite notable exception, which is payroll. So we have global leaders of payroll, like not just within crypto, just like generally global leaders of payroll, like Remote.com, Rise, Deal, even ADP, which process something like double-digit percentage of all the payroll in the US. They are pushing a lot of volume already on chain. It makes sense because a lot of these organizations, they deal cross states or cross countries. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's 24/7. It makes sense to push the stuff on chain. The thing is, like in the legacy setup, oh yeah, cool. Okay, so in the legacy setup, usually you had, an employer, this like payroll processor, and then a bank wire or ACH wire, and then you have the employee. So basically everything is sort of hidden except for the processor's internal database and the regulators. When you move this on chain, after the processor, you push it onto a public network, and then it arrives with the employee. And if it's like outside of our industry, if it's like a normal, everyday Web2 employee, you still have enough abstraction. But one of the main reasons to do things on chain is, well, there's like a lot of other things that I can do, right? Some of these providers are thinking of like, okay, how can we bake in, tap into some of the yield that is on chain for our clients? And this way, money spends more time on chain, which means you have more information leakage, and then you run into security concerns about, sometimes, in France, you might lose a finger for it, like if people know how much money you have and how you make them. So we're seeing that these type of payment processors are actually at the forefront of doing pilots around private payments. So, confidentiality and compliant confidentiality, it's not a response to a demand, it's a prerequisite for this demand to actually come on chain. So how does that look like in practice? Basically, there are, broadly speaking, 3 approaches. We've seen a lot of projects come out and secure like pretty decent funding to build a dedicated network for handling on-chain payments confidentially and privately. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. So like this usually gives, this sort of solution gives you like a full stack control, which is great, but the main problem there is that you need to basically bootstrap ecosystem from the beginning. This means like yield sources, dexes, but also integrations with on and off ramps, asset issuers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Another solution, a popular solution, are mixers and pools. Those are like mostly services that we might be familiar with, privacy pools, Railgun, et cetera, et cetera. One of the main challenges there, and why we believe that it's not the best solution specifically for payments, is that every transfer to achieve compliance, it basically has to pass a KYT test, KYT check, and that takes between 3 hours and a week. So you can't exactly run payments on this sort of speed. And the approach we're taking is on-chain encryption. This basically means that you have confidentiality, which is not full privacy, obviously, but it hits a better balance on the other trade-offs. So you can tap in existing liquidity and infrastructure. You have high settlement speed, and provenance of funds is easily provable, and also you have auditability, which is a prerequisite for a payment service provider, for example, to integrate this sort of stack. So why am I talking about this stuff here? I'm building generic, and we're a compliant confidentiality layer for stablecoin settlement. So basically what this means in simple terms is we encrypt amounts and balances, but addresses remain visible. So you end up with proven provenance. You end up with compliance, readiness, and with compatibility with existing infrastructure and liquidity. And we believe that this sort of solution slots in the most easy and natural way into an existing flow. This is broadly how it works. We believe that the next wave of adoption is not going to be people holding their self-hosted wallets, whether we like it or not. It's just the way that new capital and new users are coming on chain. So they usually have a payment service provider or custodian handling this. So you have somebody sending money, goes through a payment service provider. At that point, this gets converted into USDC, goes through a privacy pool. The receipt from the privacy pool is GUSD, generic dollar, which is an FHA encrypted confidential token. Transactions on the network happen using that token. And until someone wants to exit the system, you can not see who is sending how much money to whom. So you see start point, end point. You don't know the exact volume of transfer, which basically means not everyone on my payroll is going to know exactly how much each of their colleagues is making in a simple practical terms. This allows us to deliver payments at a speed that makes sense and is compatible with the way that people think about payments today in the off-chain world. And that's pretty much it. We are building this for the real users that are out there. It's a very unopinionated design. If some of the problems that I highlighted are something that you face in your daily business, come talk to me. Would love to hear about what you're building and what problems you're facing, and maybe validate if our solution works for you. Thanks.